I was born in Brazil, grew up in Libya, lived the past 15 years in Canada, and I've been in El Salvador for the last year and 3 months. I mean, it's fun to be here. I'm really, really excited to be in El Salvador. We have a responsibility towards Bitcoiners to make this as good as possible. And then also a responsibility towards El Salvador, that is to bring them here, see what can be done, what can be improved on, what should be worked on, etc. And together so that, we can contribute to what's happening on the ground. The biggest risk is if you come to visit, you might want to stay longer. So just take a one-way ticket and then you decide when to leave after, because, there's also other countries to visit nearby. The people here are incredibly nice, helpful. They're very happy, and you will make friends easily because Bitcoiners are here, and it's just absolutely gorgeous country and with a lot of potential. Between Brazil and El Salvador, I'm definitely favoring El Salvador at the moment. It's just that much nicer. Even the beaches. I'm definitely not seeing myself leaving anytime soon. And there's no other place right now that I'd rather be in.
Hey everyone, we are live here from Bitcoin Beach on another beautiful day. Well, they're pretty much all beautiful days here, so can't really differentiate there. But very happy we have Noor with us today. Noor is the one who makes the Adopting Bitcoin conference happen. She also works with the Bitcoin Beach wallet team and is an all around just amazing woman. So it'll be interesting to get a little bit into her background, what brought her here to El Salvador. And so, Noor, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself? I know you've kind of bounced around the world growing up, and you speak, like 10 different languages. So give us a little update.
Yeah. Hi. So my name is Noor. I am... my parents are Middle Eastern Palestinian originally. I was born in Brazil, grew up in Libya, lived the past 15 years in Canada, and I've been in El Salvador for the last year and 3 months. Yeah, it's fun to be here. I'm really, really excited to be in El Salvador. It's not 10 languages per se, they're only 5, so half of that. And I can only credit my mother for me speaking these languages, to be honest, because she was pretty strict with us growing up with languages. She thought that if all else fails in life, we would at least have some languages that will help us get by. So she was very, very strict with it.
Did you speak Spanish before you came here? Or?
I had a base in Spanish, and because I already spoke Portuguese, and I took Spanish in high school and a little bit in university, I kind of picked it up listening to people, and I don't mind necessarily sounding stupid when I speak a foreign language because, I've done that in the past. So yeah, I've kind of picked it up. And now if I have to speak Spanish, I speak Spanish. But if I know that the person sitting in front of me speaks English, then there's no way I can utter a word in Spanish.
Well, I think your Spanish is better than mine, even though I've been here for 18 years. So no, I'm always impressed at people that pick up languages and can speak multiple, because that was always my worst subject in high school. Spanish was the only C I ever got, ever was in Spanish. And that's really the only thing I really could have used in life more than anything else, was being able to speak Spanish. So yeah, that's usually how it works out.
Yeah, I think people shouldn't be graded on languages in general, because it makes it harder for you to break out of your shell and actually practice it. So although I did do some languages in school, most of the languages that I speak were taught at home. So English was through my mother, and she didn't grade us. She just corrected us as we made mistakes. Portuguese was, just practicing with friends and stuff like that. And yeah, Arabic as well. So it was never a source of anxiety per se. And so I think that's what holds a lot of people back in practicing, is just them knowing in the back of their mind that, somebody's going to come and give them a bad grade, which shouldn't be the case,
No, that's, it's a great background to have in what you're doing now. You're dealing with Bitcoiners from around the world, and able to interact both on the conference side, but also with the wallet. And I don't actually know how you got connected with Galoy or Galoy, or we were debating yesterday how you actually say it, but I guess it's
however you feel comfortable.
Yeah, in French it sounds totally different, so we can butcher it however we want. But how did you connect with Galoy and
yeah, I mean, it's a good question. So I have been looking into joining a Bitcoin company for a few years, and I was living in Canada and there wasn't that many options or Bitcoin companies hiring, and I didn't want to compromise per se by joining just a crypto company and then finding my way into the Bitcoin space. So I kept looking, and then all of a sudden it hit me. I'm like, oh well, I don't need to actually be in Montreal or find a Canadian company, so why not expand? And so that's how I got into. I discovered Bitcoin Twitter and all the amazing things happening there, and Bitcoiners jobs later on. And I saw a posting from Galoy looking for someone in marketing. That was like a few years after, right? And I knew a little bit about the story of Bitcoin Beach and Galoy's involvement in it. So I was very excited. So I applied for the job, and then I reached out to Nicholas and Chris on Twitter. I'm like, hey, I need to speak to you guys. And at the same time, they had just announced the Adopting Bitcoin conference. And there was just a Twitter page with a few hundred followers. And so I met with both Nicholas and Chris, and then Chris got back to me and he said, well, the marketing role is filled. It's not available anymore. However, we do need somebody to help us organize the conference on the ground in El Salvador, and we need that person to be there next week. Can you do that? I'm like, well, hell yeah, I can do that. And it's funny how the stars kind of aligned on this one, because, my apartment was rented in a few days. All the things that I needed to sell were sold. And it was almost like it was meant to be for me to be here. And yeah, within a week, I was down in El Salvador helping organize the conference on the ground. And it was supposed to be just a couple of months contract. And then, I would, in my mind, I would have found or I would have done a little bit of proof of work and met really great companies during the conference so that I can see what my next move is. But Galoy came back to me like, hey, we want you to stay. So I did. And now, we did the conference a second year, and now I'm more full-time with the Bitcoin Beach wallet.
I remember when Chris and Nicholas, because we'd have weekly conference calls talking about what was happening here in El Salvador, working on the wallet. And they said, yeah, we're going to do a conference in November. And I think this was like in August or something. And yeah. I'm like, what do you mean in November? Like, and maybe it was more time than that, but it was super short.
It was very short.
And I was like, how in the world are you going to pull together a conference in that amount of time? And I really don't think they would have done it without you down here, because I think in their mind it's like, oh, we'll just do it. And you just did it. You made it happen. I remember when we sat down, when you first came down, we met you, and I was thinking, oh, we're going to have to really help this lady, because she's not from here, she's not gonna have these contacts. And I started asking you, have you arranged transportation, and what kind of price did you get? And I was like, oh wow, that's better than I probably would have gotten. So I was like, okay, Noor does not need our help. She has this dialed in. She's and it was impressive that you were able to pull that off. And I mean, would you have like a couple months to put it together?
So I arrived here September 20th, 2021, and the conference was the second week of November. So a month and a half, approximately 2 months. Yeah. But I mean, I think I was running on adrenaline for the whole 2 months, right? Like I was very excited to be in El Salvador. I was very excited to be doing a Bitcoin conference, because I remember, like, this will always stay in the back of my mind as a memory. Like in 2015, there was a Bitcoin conference in Montreal, and I was living at the time right next to the Bitcoin embassy that was run by Francis Pulio. And I just remember a group of Bitcoiners walking up the street from the main conference center in Montreal to the Bitcoin embassy to visit. And all I could think of at the moment is like, oh, I wish I was there. But I never thought I was like, I knew enough to be part of these conferences. So for me, it was like a huge honor, actually, to be having the privilege to do it in El Salvador, in the first Bitcoin country, and, helping bring together Bitcoiners to this place, because in my mind, it was important. We were very mission driven, right? And I didn't do it alone. There's obviously Pretty Flaco, who's my colleague. We, talk every day, 6 a.m. religiously, conference or no. So Yeah, he's my right brain and right arm and right everything. So we've been working on this together, and yeah, like we felt very like we have a responsibility towards Bitcoiners to make this as good as possible, and then also a responsibility towards El Salvador, that people would come and don't think, it's just a third world country shit show. It's not. That wasn't the point of it. Is to bring them here, see what can be done, what can be improved on, what should be worked on, etc., and the best minds together, so that we can contribute to what's happening on the ground.
And I think you had a pretty big challenge just convincing a lot of Bitcoiners that it was safe to come to El Salvador. I don't know if you can share any of the stories or the calls that you
I won't mention anybody in specific, but there was it was kind of funny because we did the event last year was at in the Sheraton, and then this year was in the Crown Plaza. And last year in the Sheraton, although they host a lot of presidents and
I think most of the presidents of the United States have stayed there.
Yes.
It's
exactly. But the security arrangements weren't done by the hotel; they're usually done by the government, and we didn't have any contact there. And so when we asked for the security protocol of the hotel, they didn't have one. So we had to I had to call some of my friends in Montreal who worked in the event industry. I was like, hey, do you have a protocol for me to copy and get inspired by? But all that to say, yes, the number one question we had last year is El Salvador safe, right? Is it safe to be there? Is there any special security arrangements that as an attendee I need to take? Or, is there any specific places that you don't recommend me going to? And I remember thinking, if you're going to a place where you shouldn't be, even the Uber driver will not take you there, right? So they usually ask you, where are you going? So they know that you're not driving in an area that they don't want to be in. So so we ultimately we did get support in terms of security, and it was justified because people don't know what they don't know. They haven't been to El Salvador before. They never had the opportunity to come to El Salvador before. And their only source of information is what they see online, right? So, and from what I heard, yes, it was a dangerous country. It was very traumatic for people living here, and so I can understand their fear. Maybe I was crazy for coming here recklessly and just alone and during the conference here, but at the same time, I've never really felt unsafe in El Salvador, right? I've never had a problem walking out alone in the evening, or never felt threatened, much less so than any other place I've been to in the US or even in Montreal, right? And in Montreal I was robbed 5 times, and that's a whole other story I can get into. But not in El Salvador. So I was kind of, I understood where they were coming from, but it wasn't it was something that we took very seriously, and we worked on and showed people how we're going to be managing security, who we're working with, who is there, run security checks on everybody that was managing security. So it was very intense. This year it was as intense, but it wasn't the number one question anymore. I think having that many people coming to the conference last year, this year was, can I bring my wife? Can I bring my husband? Can I bring my kids? Can I get extra tickets to bring these people with me to see what El Salvador is, right? Which is a huge change in a very short amount of time.
Well, that's coming up with extra tickets is a much better problem than trying to convince them they're not going to die when they come. I remember, I mean, part of it just because we've been living here for so long. I raised my kids here, and I've never felt unsafe, and so when all those things started coming up, I was kind of surprised. Maybe I live in a bubble and don't realize how bad the publicity was about El Salvador. But I remember talking to Chris, and he's like, no, they want bulletproof cars and armed details, and they're concerned because they're Bitcoiners and people are going to think that they're wealthy and rob them. And I was explaining to him, I'm like, well, in El Salvador, it's the poor people that use Bitcoin. So they're not going to think you're wealthy just because you're a Bitcoiner. So there was that aspect. The other aspect was that foreigners have never really been in danger in El Salvador. It's been because the crime basis is more extortion. It was people, small business owners, those sorts of things. Yeah. And so I never I don't really know any foreigners that have had any issues, and even when El Salvador was at its worst, and so, but for people who've never been here before, it's hard for them to distinguish between dangers of a place like Mexico, where you could be subject to kidnapping, versus a place like El Salvador, where foreigners have always been kind of off limits, and so I was just thankful that everybody got here. And it wasn't just that aspect. This was COVID was still going on. And so there was restrictions on how many people you could have. And there was all kinds of flight restrictions. And I remember that was kind of a mess too. Just a lot of speakers missed, right? They couldn't get on their flights. And
but the advantage is that all of them wanted to come this year, right? So, but like last year, the context was very, very different. And that's what's amazing about Bitcoiners, is just they knew it was important, and everybody made all the efforts necessary to be here, right? And although in their mind they were taking a security risk, they still thought it was important enough for them to come. And so, and once they got here, they're like, well, this is a beautiful place. And, rightfully so, the mountains, the beach. I mean, in 45 minutes, you can get anywhere and completely change of scenery, weather, etc. So that definitely made them change their mind. A lot of them came back this year, and all those that felt FOMO from not being here last year came this year. So regardless of the Bitcoin price, which is awesome.
I remember last year looking at watching the hotel workers there, because Salvadorans were pretty into their masks. And so at that time, everybody was still wearing masks indoors. And none of the Bitcoiners would wear their masks. And I think at first they were trying to enforce it. And at some point they just kind of threw up their hands and like, these people are crazy. They're not going to wear their masks. And so they kind of just looked the other way. But
and we didn't even have a mask rule in the conference. So every time somebody asked, like, are you going to ask for the Vax Pass, or are you going to ask people to wear their masks? We never answered the question purposefully. I'm like, you do you. You wanna wear the mask? Great. You don't want to wear the mask? That's fine too. But it was kind of funny to see the employees of the hotel running behind people with the disinfectant, asking them to put the mask on, begging me to make an announcement. I can't do that. I'm not gonna do that. So they gave up the next day.
Well, and I've never heard any official confirmation, but I think that's also why they got rid of the testing requirement, was because a lot of people were getting stuck at the airport because their flight had been delayed and they were one day past their testing. And so the president announced kind of on Twitter in the middle of the day that, okay, effective immediately, no more. No need to have any tests to come into El Salvador.
Exactly.
So you guys are the ones that made that happen.
I mean, it's smart on their part, because it's already hard enough to come to El Salvador. There aren't a lot of direct flights, and and now with the craziness happening around the world, with flights being delayed all the time and canceled, etc. So it was kind of the evident move for them to be able to continue attracting people to come here. So and actually solidify the freedom country kind of statement along with Bitcoin, which is great.
Yeah, they've hitched their wagon to the Bitcoin train, and so I think they realize they have to follow through on those freedom oriented type laws and regulations, and so
the Bitcoin ethos
need to
be.
So that's been hopeful to see, and I'm sure this year you had a lot more time to organize the conference, but also it was you weren't dealing with as many travel restrictions and those sorts of things. And
I mean, we were dealing with none of what we had to do. We had a lot more time to organize, even though it's still a Latin American country, so everything is done in the last 2 weeks anyway. But it doesn't matter. But it was probably an improvement. It was already an improvement from the experience of last year, and hopefully next year it will be an even bigger improvement. And we had a lot more speakers coming in this year. We started off up until August, I think we had around 60 speakers, something like that we had reached out to, and then all of a sudden a flood of people started reaching out to us and like, hey, I want to talk about this. I want to, do this workshop or give this talk. And so we had no choice but to include them in. And these are, core devs and, really interesting products and communities that, we didn't know existed before. So yeah, so we ended up with 165 speakers, which is double what we had.
Wow, I didn't realize there was that many.
Yeah, there was a lot of speakers. Yeah, there was about one speaker for every 10 attendees.
Okay.
So yeah, and I think that kind of contributed to the feeling of, it's a very Bitcoin conference, because wherever you walked outside, you would find a very prominent speaker to talk to and just hang out with, have a beer with, or have a cup of coffee, whatever.
Yeah.
Right, and discuss topics. And wherever you went, you would hear really interesting conversations happening amongst people. And that's the point of a conference, right? Is to create these bridges of people in meet spaces that go beyond Twitter, right? So and that's where the real work starts to happen, because you can ask more questions, dig deeper into the conversation without necessarily having to, appear as if you're killing each other on Twitter over threads. So yeah.
It definitely seemed like the caliber of speakers that you guys had was a step above what I've seen in a lot of other conferences, or not. Maybe that's unfair to say. Maybe not a step above, but the ones that were actually doing the work, that were on the ground. It seemed like there was less focus on like influencers and that sort of thing, and more focus on people that were actually building things, which makes for just great conversations, because you're actually hearing what's happening. And I don't know if you guys set out to do that purposely, or if it just kind of came together.
Headliners.
Or
I mean, that's 100%. I mean, that's Pretty Flacco, who manages the website, communication, Twitter, etc. He's the man behind all of that. He is adamant, and I agree with him 100%. Like that's not something we're ever going to change. There is no headliners in the event, right? So everybody is a speaker. You're there because you have something important to say, or you're doing something of value to the Bitcoin space. So so the list didn't seem that big on the website, but once you're in the space, you're like, oh, Greg Foss is here, and the Prince of Serbia is here, but they kind of disappeared on the website because everybody's organized by alphabetical order.
No, I know. I mean, usually the conferences, the mainline speakers, have the big pictures, and you get down, and there's me at Bitcoin Beach, a little tiny thumbnail that you can barely see. But you guys just had everybody on the same level, and like you said, just kind of alphabetically ordered. And I think even the speakers like that. Even the people who would normally be headliners, I think they like just being part of something.
Part of the space, yeah. I mean, that's something that we've heard from many people, that are accustomed to going to many conferences. They're constantly invited to different places, and the speakers, just as much as the attendees, they want to talk to the attendees, because these are the users, right? These are the people that are going to be testing their product. These are the first people that will be, excited to try out new things, and they want to have these conversations because they're mostly startups, right? And startups need to have that feedback from people immediately, and as much as they can get it through data testing, etc., or talking to people online, it's different from seeing it, live with peers and getting the feedback right away, and feedback that is informed, right? Because they know the technical difficulties or the different solutions that the entrepreneurs might be able to implement in order to solve their problems, right? So that's always interesting.
I think too, what's so great about the conference is people can use Bitcoin everywhere. Exactly. And you go to a lot of conferences. I'm kind of shocked now when I go to conferences, because I'm, living in El Salvador, you just expect to be able to use Bitcoin. And you think, especially at a conference, and a lot of times even in the conference itself, you can't spend in Bitcoin. So I think that adds a real kind of neat element of people feel like, wow, this is really real. I can pay for my hotel with Bitcoin. I can go out on the street in another restaurant and pay with Bitcoin. And so I think that that's part of what makes it so special being in El Salvador. And to me, it just had a different feel to it. It's kind of like you're there with family, and it's just hanging out. Nobody's it didn't really feel like some conferences you go, everybody's trying to network and see who they can meet and try to generate sales leads or whatever. It doesn't feel like that at all. It just feels just like, hey, these are a bunch of people that are very passionate about the space and they just want to be here.
Yeah.
And so, and it was very Bitcoin only. I don't know if the shitcoiners knew to just stay away, or if you guys had to actively swat them away, or.
I mean, I guess the fact that we're in a bear market helped weed out a lot of people. The fact that you have to pay your ticket in Bitcoin also discourages a whole lot of people. And just looking at the schedule, it's evident, and we have it written on our FAQ. We're not covering crypto. We're only talking about Bitcoin. We're not even talking about price. That's not part of the conversation. So, and if we do, it's going to be in the context of, Bitcoin macroeconomics, etc. So it's, it just naturally happens to, deter a lot of people. Although it's funny because the day before the conference, I was outside, kind of, checking last minute things, and there was this guy, and I started chatting with him, and he told me, yeah, I'm here because my boss made me come here, but really, I'm more of a realistic kind of guy. I like to look at cryptocurrencies as a whole, Bitcoin being one of them, blah blah blah. So I don't really like the aspect of the conference that is only focused on Bitcoin. I'm like, okay, cool, interesting. And then he looks at me, he's like, so what do you do? I'm like, should I tell him? Should I not? I did tell him. And then after that, he was like, always, how are you? Being all nice. So yeah, but I mean, there were some, and hopefully it's not so much that we don't want them there, right? It's not about that. But there's so many things happening in the Bitcoin space already, and there's, so much to talk about that there is no time to focus on other things, right? And we will never do that because of our understanding of this space and our conviction in Bitcoin. So there is no point in even discussing whether or not we would have them. So, just
and I was speaking more of the speakers and the companies that were sponsoring. Of course, obviously for the attendees, you want everybody to be exposed to what's happening here. And so. And I love that you guys really did reach out to the Salvadoran community and provide that $21 ticket for Salvadorans, because for a lot of them, a normal price ticket is going to be inaccessible. So I love that you guys did that.
And we did even lower it sometimes, because the idea wasn't necessarily, we knew we're not going to make money with the $21 tickets. So it wasn't about that. It was just about making sure that whoever comes to the conference has made at least one purchase in Bitcoin in their life. So, we've sold at much lower than that. We never went below $1, just for the symbolism of it, so that they have the learning experience starts before you actually come to the conference. It starts with paying your ticket and then coming to the conference. So, So I'm very happy that we actually managed to attract enough sponsors to help us bring even more Salvadorans to the conference, because otherwise we would have had to focus more on attracting international attendees to be able to cover the expenses and stuff. So that's great.
It seemed like Bitfinex really stepped up in a big way. It seems like they're very focused on El Salvador right now. They're everywhere in El Salvador at the moment. Like, there isn't a social initiative we can think of that hasn't gotten the support of Bitfinex. They paid for the building of the new Hope House that we're doing on the other end of the country. While they were during the conference, I was able to spend some time with some of the folks from Bitfinex and just kind of hearing their vision. They really do see El Salvador as critical to expansion throughout the world, not just for them as a company, but for the whole Bitcoin space. And so you got a general sense that they really feel this at a core level, that it's important to support. So I love the fact that they sponsored Adopting Bitcoin, and it seemed like that gave you guys more flexibility and freedom to do things, and to bring some people in from projects that maybe needed a little help to come in. And so,
for sure. I mean, it did provide us a lot of, it gave us a room to breathe instead of just focusing about how do we make more money, because things here are expensive, right? Because there isn't a lot of competition. when somebody knows that they're providing a good service, they're entitled to set their price, right? So that these prices tend to be very, very high. And yeah, the organizing a conference here is actually more expensive than doing one in Canada. So it's so we were very happy that that Bitfinex decided to support. There is again their ethos or their mindset is of financial freedom, and they've published a manifesto about it. And obviously Galoy has been supporting the conference, covering, the P&L of the conference, taking the risk of putting the conference together without necessarily knowing whether or not we have sponsors. So that's a huge risk. And then, when Bitfinex came into play, the two of them together was just perfect for us to be able to make it even more impactful than we would have expected at the beginning of the year. Yeah. So.
Yeah, I remember talking to Nicholas and Chris about that last year, and it's like, your startup, you guys really want to take this risk on? But they were just like, no, it's important. Too important. We need to make sure that this happens and that it happens in a Bitcoin focused way. And so, I think in retrospect, it was a very wise move on their part, but it was definitely taking a risk to make that happen.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's always a risk, right? Because our objective with the conference is we're not making money, and then everything that is that we make as a surplus will be donated to an educational initiative here. So right now we're finalizing the numbers to figure out whether or not
that's going to my first Bitcoin, right? Or at least
part of it is Me Premier Bitcoin. So we'll see how much money we've actually made, how much money we have, and then we'll decide if it's just Me Premier Bitcoin, and other initiatives, because there is a lot of new exciting projects that are spurring up in El Salvador. There's Torogos as well. Obviously, all the work that Hope House is doing, and all the the great initiatives. It's kind of hard to pick and choose at this point, because everybody has their focus, and they're all equally important, I would say. So Me Premier Bitcoin is definitely one of the beneficiaries, depending on how much we have, obviously. We don't want to give peanuts either. So it's like but it's fun to know that we did make some that will stay. So again, the idea is not to make money with the conference, and everything that is made here will stay here, so that we can continue developing and supporting El Salvador.
And you guys had a bigger crowd this year, right?
Yes.
It was
so 1,000 people came. About 220 something Salvadorians were there, as opposed to 3 last year, which is already a great improvement. We had a lot more media representation as well. Not always the greatest coverage. Apparently, according to one in particular, we had no great speakers, or no renowned speakers, and barely anybody in the rooms, but we did have 1,000 people. So that's almost double what we had last year. And, 200% more Salvadorans, which is awesome.
I think I read one of those reviews. I was like, what conference were they at? This was the best Bitcoin conference I've ever been to. And everybody else, obviously maybe I'm not the most objective, but everybody else I talked to said the same thing. So I was just kind of like, I don't know if this person even showed up for the conference, or if they were just writing headlines from, the US or something.
Yeah. I mean, it's funny. It almost felt like reading that article in particular, it almost felt like the journalist came with the story in his mind, and then, he just wrote the story and left, right? So he just showed up to say I was there, but didn't really spend the time to talk to anybody or even look that deeply into anything we've done. So that's unfortunate. And then, but it doesn't matter. I mean, we know what we're doing, and we have nothing to hide, which is that's all we have to say.
Well, especially if this person was just kind of peeking in, because there were some of the big salon rooms that at times weren't full, but that's because you guys had 6 speakers, 6 different stages going at the same time, and so obviously you have to deal with the size of rooms that are at the place, and so the smaller rooms were packed overflowing, and because the crowd was pretty evenly divided between the different groups. So
and because people knew also that these rooms were not recorded, so they might as well go to the workshops. They're more hands-on, and they like the fact that there were small rooms where they can interact with each other and with the presenters directly. So it we weren't sure about the workshop rooms. We thought maybe there were too many of them, but every time I went and checked, they were always
everyone I
filled
went
the
to,
beam.
you had to get there earlier. You didn't get a seat.
Exactly, you
Yeah.
didn't get a seat. Exactly. So the whole second floor was always full. There was always movement there, and and they weren't recorded, so people knew that they might as well go there and then watch the main stages later.
Yeah.
So yeah.
I think we have some video from the conference. I don't
Yeah.
know if there's anything specific you wanted to point
highlight.
out. But
yeah, this was done by a volunteer, by the way, like this video. I think that's another part that is so great about Bitcoiners is that we got a lot of support from just random people reaching out to us on Twitter and saying, hey, we can do this and we can do that. So the design of the t-shirts, for instance, that was done by a volunteer. And the booth for the kids book gave us an idea for next year, maybe having a kids zone. So I think I'm excited for next year. I really am. I think it's going to be even better. Maybe not bigger. We don't necessarily need it to be bigger. I don't think it's the size that matters, but it also will put a lot more pressure on us financially, maybe to compromise certain things if we go bigger. So this size is good. It's manageable.
I like that size. It's easier to like interact with people. You don't feel lost.
Exactly.
You can just have. It just feels much more natural and not forced.
Exactly. So exactly, and it gives people opportunity to actually connect. Bigger than that, I mean, I always say like we're doing a conference that we would enjoy being in, right?
Yeah.
So, and huge conferences are almost, they're too overwhelming, at least to me. I'm an introvert, actually, so I do like being around people, but I do need my time alone as well. And being in conferences is overwhelming, and so what I loved about this year is that there was a lot of room for people to hide and have smaller groups and do their thing. And then the smaller rooms in the workshop areas also were very introvert friendly. Which, I mean, we got to admit, a lot of people in the Bitcoin space are like that. So we kind of have to cater to these needs. Yeah.
No, I'm the exact same way. I mean, I love people, but I need to rejuvenate and energize on my own. Yeah. So
it took me a week to recuperate after adopting Bitcoin. I'm like, I'm hiding. I'm going to the beach. I was in El Zonte for a week, but no one knew. Whenever I met somebody on the street, I'm like, hi, bye.
Yeah, at times I would just kind of put my head down and walk because I'm like, I just need to go back to my room and spend an hour. And I know if I make eye contact, I'm going to get, and you love interacting with people, but sometimes you just need that.
Yeah. And people think I'm standoffish for it, but really, no, it's just sometimes I'm like, I'm in my bubble, so I don't necessarily pay attention to what's happening around me. It's like the introvert in me, but I love being around people, and especially Bitcoiners. They're such, you were saying earlier, they're different, they're eclectic, they all come from such different spaces, and they all came into Bitcoin for different reasons and why, and and I love asking people how they got into it, and just try to understand their mindset coming into it and what changed about them, because your whole worldview kind of changes, shifts.
No, I think we're wired fairly similar, like to the point, get things done, direct. It's like, oh, sorry, I forgot to say hello to you before I asked the first thing. Like it's.
Yeah, it's actually kind of comforting, but I mean, I have to readapt after when dealing with people here, because people here are incredibly polite,
very relational.
Exactly. And so I always feel like, oh, maybe they think I'm impolite, because here you have to say good morning,
first
good night, you
greet them. You see somebody eating a meal, you can buen provecho. Like if you don't even know, I'm like, I have to remind myself of those things too, because it's not that I'm rude, but I'm just, in my mind, I'm always focused on getting something done. And so, but I like being in a culture that is on the other side of that. I think it's healthy for me to be reminded of those things. So.
It keeps you grounded in a way. It kind of reminds you to take a moment to think about the other person as well.
No, it's a very relational, non-confrontational society, and I'm kind of the opposite. And so I have to remind myself that
the non-confrontational part is a bit frustrating sometimes. It's really, really frustrating. Like we were in a restaurant a couple of weeks ago, and people they can't say no here. They just will not say no. and it's really interesting as a phenomena. So you have to really ask them multiple questions for actually to get to the right, somebody told me yesterday it might be a coping mechanism for trauma and stuff like that. So they're very non-confrontational, and that's totally understandable given the history of El Salvador. But a couple of weeks ago, we were in a restaurant, and I asked the server, "Do you have chicken legs?" And he's like, "We have salmon." So he wouldn't tell me no. Well, immediately gave me another option that was not even remotely close to what I originally wanted. But it's interesting, but it's something that people need to take into consideration and adapt to in the work environment, but even relationally as well, so that they can take into consideration how things work here.
Yeah. So I know fresh off the conference, before you even had time to catch your breath, that Galoy and the Bitcoin Beach wallet team, that I know they're two separate companies, but with definitely connections, that they moved you. Are you officially the CEO, or what is your position there now?
Yeah. It's it's not public yet, but we're doing the paperwork.
It's public now
yeah.
Then I guess.
I guess it is now. So so before we actually finished the conference, that was a decision made by Chris and Nicholas, given the fact that I've been here for a year, more than a year, speak the language, I know,
get stuff done.
I get stuff done. That's the reputation I'm building now. And and I have a good relationship with the team, etc. And I mean, it's a huge responsibility, immense honor, obviously, to be taken on that role. It's interim for the time being, so that I can see whether or not this is something that I can actually deliver on, which for the most part, I don't think I'm gonna be bad at, but I
have no doubts when talk to Nicholas and Chris about it. I'm like, no, for sure, that's the right choice. You need to push that forward. So
yeah. I mean, everybody's I'm always very careful when I'm taking on a responsibility like that. There was kind of the same mindset last year with adopting Bitcoin. Like I put a lot more pressure on myself than other people put on me. But now that there is expectation also from others about what will be accomplished, I'm like, oh God, I have to think 10 times bigger now, which is good. I mean, it's gonna be fun because it's Bitcoin Beach wallet. It's the first wallet to be developed in El Salvador for El Salvador, and it's just incredible. Yeah, I still can't believe it. So it's exciting.
What do you see as the things you're most excited about pushing forward, and what do you think are kind of the biggest challenges that you'll be facing this next year?
Yeah, I mean, the increasing the number of users that are using the wallet, obviously the transacting in the wallet would be the main focus for us, whether in El Salvador or around it as well. We still need to decide that, given regulatory environment, etc. And who knows, maybe also go beyond Latin America. Maybe not in the first year, but we'll see what can be accomplished in the first 90 days, and then where do we go from there. Biggest challenge is always, I mean, it's sort of the case for everybody, is always education, like having people understand what is Bitcoin, how to use it, etc. Which, luckily the wallet already has a built-in earn and learn section that we need to develop even more, and maybe have a little bit more focus on it. And teach people how to earn Bitcoin, right? Like how to use Bitcoin as money to actually attract these tourists that they want to attract and make their business more profitable. So yeah, we're still, I mean, I've started 2 weeks ago, so I'm still kind of exploring what needs to be the focus, and I'm having a lot of conversations with Nicholas about it. So, and the team as well, because they've been on the ground doing a lot of work for a year, and they have a lot of great ideas. So we're kind of putting all this together. That's what I'm trying to do, and then organizing it into a timeline of, okay, this is what we need to do first, and this is what we need to do after. And yeah, everybody's is very excited because they have a military style lady now coming in with like timelines, and we need to hit these objectives, and we have 90-day goals, and So yeah, so they're excited about that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, if you can just rub off a little bit on the Chivo wallet also and help them get their.
I'll leave that to other people. I think.
It's been an ongoing source of frustration. Obviously, I think I actually like that the government has the wallet. I think there's it is essential for what they're doing, but I think there's some misunderstanding of how it interacts with other wallets, and so that's the frustration we see from the press.
Yeah.
Every time I do an interview, that's the first thing they're like, "Hey, we just tried to buy something with Bitcoin and it didn't work. Is Bitcoin down?" I'm like, "No, Bitcoin does not go down." I said, "Were they using Chivo wallet?" "Yeah, and they created this QR code, but it said it was invalid." And
and it's creating a chicken and egg problem where the stores want to use Bitcoin because they want to attract the tourists. The tourists go to the store, but they can't pay in with Bitcoin because Chivo is not working. And so the store owner decides, okay, well, Bitcoin is not working, so there's no point in accepting Bitcoin. And a month later, they decide to stop using it altogether. So that's sort of the loop we're stuck in until, the shop owner decides to go with a different service provider or, look into how to use Chivo in a better way, that the people who are here to use Bitcoin and spend Bitcoin are able to pay towards it with the Chivo terminal, right?
Yeah.
Which aren't necessarily always. Well, the majority are not Salvadorians, so or maybe they are, but it's just so much easier for them to make the transactions within Chivo. But you're ignoring a whole set of people that are more vocal, more public, with their criticism. So, and that's sort of the issue.
That's what I've been trying to push. That maybe the majority of the Salvadorans are using Chivo, so it's not an issue, but you're missing this opportunity for all these tourists that are coming in. And if they have a bad experience, they're not going to come back.
Exactly.
And it also creates a huge headache. The press is already looking for negative stories and you're basically feeding them to them. Yeah. So if we could just get that to work, then we can just deal with the normal FUD, not the... Because those things you're like, well, it's
not the
legitimate.
You can't defend.
So... but I'm hopeful for that. I'm hopeful as Bitcoiners, we kind of keep pushing that we want the project to be successful. We want 100%. Chivo to be successful. We, 100%. I actually think there's a lot of good components to it. It's just a couple links that are, not functioning as they should. So hopefully
but I think
that'll
there's
change.
A lot of people that are now paying attention to the criticism and are actively working to improve it because it benefits everybody, right? If Chivo works well, we're all happy. We all benefit. Bitcoin Beach Wallet, Strike, everybody, right? All companies in the Bitcoin space will have a lot of vested interest in having a good functioning Chivo wallet, specifically the interoperability of the Chivo wallet, which is not necessarily 100% at the moment. So
no, I'm hoping they can get that resolved. Also, with the new regulations as far as the KYC and AML, because that is, I know for myself, I was purchasing windows. We're redoing a home. And so it was going to be like $10,000 in window purchase. And they're like, well, we can only take $700 a day. And I think it was per week. They wanted us to come. And I'm like, that doesn't make any sense. You guys are recreating the same dysfunction that exists with the fiat system, and now you're loading that up on Bitcoin. Like, that defeats what we're trying to do. So I'm not naive. I know they have issues that they're dealing with. They want to make sure they don't get cut off from the US banking rails. And, I'm sure there are people that are looking for excuses to kind of slap them on the hand, but we also have to be realistic. Like in the US, nobody's going to do KYC over your window purchases. And here they really put the screws to them. And it creates this kind of cycle of, it makes it hard to do business here. So there's less jobs. So people leave or join the gangs because there's less opportunity. Exactly. And so it's actually the US policy of KYC and AML is actually causing the problems that we have in El Salvador. The ones they say they're trying to fix, they're the ones actually perpetuating those. And so we're hoping we can get people to look at the bigger picture and realize we want this country to be thriving. We want the economy to run smoothly. We want to take friction out of the process.
Yeah.
Because if you make it hard for somebody to invest here, they're like, I don't have time for it. I'm not going to be spending time jumping through all these hoops to try to move a few $1,000s into the country to, buy a car, to do something like that. So that's where I'm kind of going to keep pushing back, because we can't just recreate the same broken system.
Exactly. And I think that's sort of where we're at right now in El Salvador, in the transitory phase of, where we have the fiat legacy system and the Bitcoin standard kind of trying to find a middle ground to either coexist or one pushing the other out, who knows? But like their fiat legacy regulations are very burdensome. Even the banks themselves. Do you know that once you open a bank account here, you can't receive international payment for like 6 months at a time?
Yeah.
Right. So you open the bank account and you can't use it for 6 months, essentially, right? And
it's a pain just to be able to open it.
Exactly.
It took me 10 years to get a bank account here.
Exactly. And then once you have it, you put money in there and then you can't use it.
Yeah.
Right. So what's the point? And then trying to recreate that into the Bitcoin world, that's not going to fly. Right. So they need to adapt. And I think, I wouldn't be surprised, because although you can criticize them as much as you want, but they do listen to all the feedback, and then they try to implement it as fast as possible. So I wouldn't be necessarily surprised if there's a new, AML regulation that comes specifically for Bitcoin companies sometime soon. So who knows? We're crossing fingers.
No, I'm hopeful that they'll see that it needs to be that way, or else it's not going to work. But also, I think all of us in the space need to be putting pressure on the people that are putting pressure on them, which is mostly the US, that's pushing regulations that are much more stringent. I have a business in the US. You can move tens of thousands of dollars around, do different things very easily. I never have any issues there. Here, I was signing like a 6-month maintenance contract on my car, and I had to fill out AML, KYC, prove where I was getting this $600 to pay this like repair contract on my car, which is just utterly ridiculous. And so that makes it expensive to do things here. All those things put friction on the system. And it's so hypocritical that the US doesn't require that in the US, but they're requiring it in this impoverished country that's trying to move ahead, but they're basically handcuffing them. And threatening them that, whoa, if you cross this line, that we're not going to tell you even clearly what the line is, but there's this fuzzy line out there, and if you cross it, you may get cut off from the banking system.
Exactly.
So it just creates this sense of fear and dysfunction. And it's crazy, because the U.S. says they want to, stop irregular immigration to the U.S. out of places like El Salvador, but then they create the environment that causes it. So hopefully we can kind of keep pushing and get them to see that they're the ones actually causing the problems, not fixing them.
Yeah. And I mean, luckily and that's sort of the hope that Bitcoin is bringing, is that there is more Bitcoiners that want to be here, that are choosing to be here. They're selling everything they have, wherever they come from Australia, Denmark, the US, etc., to be in El Salvador and to build in El Salvador. And so the government now has a vested interest in making sure that these people stay, because they will be creating jobs, they will be providing opportunities for the future generation of Salvadorans. So there is a way to have these two options, so that they don't lose their standing with the international community, because let's be realistic, they still need it. A lot of people rely on it, etc. But at the same time, allow this new economy to develop in El Salvador, so that they're not stuck in the same cycle for many generations to come. So
no, that's what brings me hope, is you do have all these people bringing outside pressure, and a lot of times they're more willing to be vocal than the local population. And so they're like, hey, this is crazy. And like you said, a lot of them have sold everything without even visiting El Salvador first. They just sold everything and got on a plane, and they're like, this is home now. So I think that's just going to bring so much positive momentum with it.
Yeah.
So
yeah, I mean, I'm
about
surprised about it, even though I've sort of done the same. You know, I didn't necessarily own any properties in Canada, but I did move here on a whim. My plan was to stay for 3 months. I'm here a year and 3 months after. But you know, it's incredible how many people I've met, expats that literally sold everything they have in their country and moved here. And it is giving me hope, because they have a different mindset, right? They want to build, right? And they want to develop the economy, and they want to contribute to it in a positive way. And, you know, the biggest frustration of Bitcoiners here is that if they're spending their Bitcoin, they're giving it to someone that will go and sell it, right? And they want them to keep it, because they know that in the long term, it will benefit them, it will benefit future generations. And so that's the sort of people that are coming here, and that's giving me a lot of hope. Yeah, for sure.
What other things are you seeing happening in El Salvador that you're excited about? Are you seeing any local grown projects or companies that are coming in that you guys are interacting with that you think are exciting?
Yeah, there is K1. I think we have the video for it.
Andy, can you put the video up for the K1 ATM
machine? Yeah. So this project is done in El Salvador. It's interoperable with the Bitcoin Beach wallet, obviously. And so this is a video that went kind of viral last week on Twitter of kids exchanging their coins for Bitcoin. And that's super, super useful for the developing world, right? Because, you know, if you're a cash-based society, you're dealing with a lot of coins all the time. And, you know, kids, look at that. I mean, they're piles and piles of coins, just want to get rid of them because they're all annoying as hell. No one wants to have them.
And most people don't realize this, but El Salvador is the dumping ground for all the $1 coins that they released them in the US and people hated them. Nobody wanted to use them. So they decided instead to ship them all to El Salvador. Yeah. So here, you rarely see a $1 bill. You usually get the $1 coin. But it's funny because they're US money, but when you take them back to the US and try to use them, a lot of times stores will look at you and say, well, we don't take foreign currency. You're like, no, that's a US dollar.
Oh my God. So, okay, that explains. That happened to me in the airport of Colombia this year, where I was, I mean, they should accept dollars, and I had coins with me and I was trying to pay them in coin. They're like, we only take dollars. I'm like, it is a dollar. Look, there's the face of a US president of some year on it. But yeah, no, they wouldn't take it. I was surprised, but now I know why. Now I understand why.
Yep. El Salvador received all the coins that nobody in the US wanted to use.
Jeez,
so
that's crazy. Yeah. So that's an exciting project. There's Tianki as well, a company that is working on merchant solutions for the accounting, you know, supply chain, their management systems, etc., which is really, really interesting.
And K1 is a Salvadoran company.
Yes.
Okay. And are they selling these units internationally, or can people go on their website and order them from them?
Correct.
Or? Okay.
Yeah, they can order it from them on their website.
And it's coin only. So it's
coins only.
Okay.
Yeah, it's only coins, small coins, up to 1 cent. I think they can go, and then you buy Bitcoin with it, which is awesome.
I love that.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's the CEO Edgar. He's a Salvadoran, born and raised.
He's a young guy, right?
He's a young guy. Yeah, he's a young guy.
I mean, everybody seems young to me. I'm pushing 50 here in a couple of years, so it's.
You're young too. But yeah, he's a young guy. He built K1 last year. I think it's been around for a while, at least a year and something.
Okay.
I saw it the first time in adopting Bitcoin last year, and the team with Bitcoin Beach Wallet, you know, we started working with them very, very closely, because, you know, it is a problem. You're especially when you're dealing with a population of El Salvador, where, you know, the minimum salary is 365, then, you know, the likelihood of people walking around with coins is very, very high, and that's what, you know, you see most of the time. That's what extortionists used to take from people, like 70 cents. It's something you would have been killed for here in El Salvador at some point. So that's it's a very useful solution. And some of the people that came to adopting Bitcoin from the African continent, so Nigeria and South Africa and Cameroon, their minds just blew up, because they're they thought this is something super needed in their countries as well. So yeah, the solutions that would come here from entrepreneurs that are in El Salvador and understand the problem of their people are going to be just that much more interesting. Just like Mashankura.
Yeah.
I love this guy.
No, he is an amazing guy. He came down to Argentina with us, and he put up with me butchering his name, every time. And yeah, it's just so brilliant.
Yeah.
I was just kind of blown away.
Yeah. I have a secret because I call him Mashankura because I don't want to butcher his actual name. I find Mashankura much easier to say.
Well, he let me call him just KG instead
Okay.
of Kahatsu, which I kept, butchering. So, yeah, super, super great guy. In fact, I'm hoping to see him in South Africa in a couple weeks.
Cool.
Me and my son are going to visit Bitcoin Akasi and spend some time with Herman and the project there. And so we're hoping that KG will join us for that time. If we can get some of his time. Everybody's after him right now. After speaking at the 3 conferences, everybody realized just how brilliant he was, but how hot the product that he's developed with Mashankura. And so I know he's being pursued by a lot of investors right now. So hopefully we can get some time from him.
Yeah, I hope he gets a sizable investment because his product is absolutely great.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, so simple and easy to use and so necessary. And I think he has a lot of other great ideas in his head. I mean, he's just one of those brilliant guys that kind of see a problem and just manifest it.
Yeah.
So I think he built that in like a few months.
Something like that.
He'll be one of those. He'll be one of those people. Yeah, oh yeah.
You're like, what? Wait, how old are you?
He'll be one of those people that we'll keep hearing from. That will have subsequent.
I hope so.
Things
yeah. I hope so. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, he's absolutely brilliant, humble guy, built an incredible product, and I hope he gets. I think he deserves a sizable investment that will help him advance his project. Because again, the same as everything else, any type of project that helps improve adoption will be beneficial for everybody else. So it's great. Yeah.
So curious for, a lot of the people that will be watching this will be expats that are thinking about possibly moving to El Salvador. So would love just some of your honest, unvarnished opinion on El Salvador, the things that you like, the things that you don't like, the challenges, the unexpected joys, what?
The things that I like, I mean, just do it. I mean, even if you come for his visit, it's going to be like John here in El Zonte. He was supposed to leave tomorrow, and then he extended to March, I think.
Everybody does that. They're like, I'm 2 weeks. And you're like, well, I was supposed to leave, but I changed my flight. I mean, the airlines are probably getting annoyed. They're like, everybody comes to El Salvador, and then they kept changing their flights. They keep changing them.
Yeah. So, so that's the biggest risk is if you come to visit, you might want to stay longer. So just take a one-way ticket, and then you decide when to leave after, because there's also other countries to visit nearby. So that could be a good excuse.
Especially these days, one-way tickets, you don't really get much of a discount for buying round trip anyway. Exactly. So you might as well buy a one-way. Yeah.
So that's advice number 1. The people here are incredibly nice, helpful. They're very happy. And I think the fact that they see that many tourists and people wanting to settle in El Salvador is giving them a lot of hope. So, just find a way to interact with Salvadorians. Don't stick only with Bitcoiners, because I think you would learn a lot more from Salvadorians that you would do from fellow expats. Even though the expats are really interesting to meet up with as well, you will make friends easily because Bitcoiners are here, and they're here to stay, and it's kind of fun to form there's little pouches of families forming everywhere all over the country. It's beautiful. You'll never be bored. You can go to the mountain, you can go to the hot springs, you can go to the beach, and if you want to go to Guatemala, it's a few hours drive. It's just absolutely gorgeous country and with a lot of potential. So I wasn't necessarily expecting. It was never on the maps for me, El Salvador, really, because if I was going to go to, in my mind, if I'm going to Latin America, I might as well go to Brazil. I'm from there. So, but between Brazil and El Salvador, I'm definitely favoring El Salvador at the moment. It's just that much, nicer. Even the beaches.
Yeah.
Even the beaches. Yeah.
It's funny. A lot of people, even non-Bitcoiners, they're traveling through Latin America. They want to do Guatemala and see like the Mayan villages, and then their next focus is getting to Costa Rica, and El Salvador is kind of a pass through in their mind. And then they come and they're like,
"What?
Oh wow, I think I want to stay here." Or you'll see them, and then a few weeks later you see them again. They're like, "We decided El Salvador was better than Costa Rica, so we came back because of that." So. Yeah. You definitely see a lot of that.
Yeah.
And I think the other thing that I love about El Salvador is you don't really have like expat ghettos. It's everybody mixes very freely. You don't, it just feels like normal. Some places you go, it's like you're only hanging out with people that aren't even from the country. But here it seems like everybody mixes very well.
Yeah.
So.
And honestly, what makes El Salvador so beautiful, obviously, is the scenery, nature, the volcanoes. Even the earthquakes are interesting. But the people are really what makes it so special and unique, because they're so warm, so welcoming. I haven't, you always talk about Latinos being so warm and welcoming. Salvadorans they push it to a whole other level. It's really nice.
No, that was the reason that we bought a home here 18 years ago. It was just like, it just felt so comfortable.
Yes.
The people weren't like trying to sell you stuff.
Exactly.
It wasn't like pushing on you, but if you asked them for anything, they were happy to help you. But if you wanted to be left alone, they left you alone. And so I love that kind of, just kind of, I don't even know how to describe it, but it's just this like ease of like, hey, you're part of life here, and
your family now.
Yeah.
It's funny because there was I always talk about this guy, but when I first arrived, I stayed in an Airbnb in San Salvador, and the owner was so nice that I almost feel like I'm a daughter. He adopted me as a daughter now. So it's like I go visit him all the time, because he calls me all the time. It was just as much as my parents. He's just checking on me all the time, and it's really, really like that's the spirit. He amplifies the Salvadorian for me. So it's I love this place. Yeah.
So this might be a long-term home then.
Who knows? I think me. I get anxious. I get like my feet start itching after a while, because I've grown up moving around a lot. I don't know, but I feel very comfortable here. So maybe it's a longer term stay. I'm definitely not seeing myself leaving anytime soon. So that's a good sign. And there's no other place right now that I see I'd rather be in. Yeah. So that's means for now I'm here, and I love it here.
Before letting people know how they can follow you and everything you're doing and the conference and everything, is there anything else that we haven't talked about today that you feel like people got to know this about El Salvador, or what we're doing, or anything like
that? Nothing comes to mind. Nothing comes to mind.
We covered a lot of ground.
Exactly. We've covered quite a bit of ground. Yeah.
Well, you're a lot of times kind of a behind the scenes person. I think a lot of people in the space don't know who you are. They just see all the work that you do and think these things happen. So how can people follow you? I'm assuming you're on Twitter and...
Yes. You have to.
Yes. So why don't you give your Twitter handle and any other, for the conference or for Bitcoin Beach Wallet or any other place you want people to be following for information?
Sure. So my Twitter handle is NURAELB, Noora ELB. That's where you can follow me on Twitter. Other websites that are interesting to look into, obviously the Galoy.io, bbw.sv, that's bitcoinbeachwallet.sv, and last but not least, adoptingbitcoin.org. Yeah, and if you're curious, if you're one of these odd Arab speakers in the space, there's bitcoinarabic.org as well, in which I'm a contributor. So check that out as well.
Nice. All right. Well, appreciate you coming down. I know
course.
we gave you an excuse to come down to El Zante for the day.
Yeah.
So hopefully you go enjoy the beach for the rest of the day.
Will do.
And we'll have to circle back in a few months and get updates on what's going on with the wallet. And
Sure.
as you guys start preparing for next year's conference, start talking about what the focus is going to be and the speakers.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. I mean, any ideas are good ideas. So Adopting Bitcoin now has a GitHub page. So if you want to share your thoughts and submit discussions for the community, don't hesitate to find us there as well. We're gonna add it to the website soon. It's not there yet, and it's work in progress. But yeah.
perfect.
But thanks for having me. It's thank you for giving me the excuse of being in El Zante.
All right, we'll have to make this a regular every few months. At least get you out of the city and into the beach at least once in a while.
I would love to.
All right, thanks.